If I had known Arden Vexley was coming back into my life, I would have taken my heat suppressants and fled the country. But here I was, standing in the 20th floor conference room of Zenith Dynamics, surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee, corporate anxiety, and the faint undertone of dominance that had just entered the building, like a well-dressed threat. The new CEO was late, and the room buzzed with speculation. I kept my head down, fingers ghosting over my tablet as if rereading the same spreadsheet for the 4th time meant anything. My heart was racing in a way it hadn't since high school. Since him. Apparently he's from a military background, whispered Janice beside me. Ex-Special Forces or something. That's why HR looks like they're sweating bullets. I didn't respond. My ears were tuned for something else, something worse than gossip. A scent. And when the elevator doors finally opened, I caught it. Pine wood. Clean leather. And that sharp edge of authority that curled instinct into something raw. Then he stepped out. Arden Vexley. Taller than I remembered. Shoulders broader, suit more expensive, presence still loud without a word. But it was his face that did it. That damn face. Familiar in the worst way. Sharp jaw, slightly arched brows, lips that once curled into the cruelest grin I'd ever known. His gaze swept the room like he owned it. Until it landed on me. And paused. It was just a second. But I felt it like a punch. His eyes widened slightly, and then, worse, a flicker of amusement touched his mouth. Not mocking. Not cruel. Something far more dangerous. Recognition. I lowered my head instantly, praying he wouldn't say my name. I hadn't heard it from his lips in 10 years. Not since he used to spit it across locker rooms with a smirk. Puppy, he used to call me. Because I flinched when startled. Because my scent was weak back then. Because I was quiet and soft-spoken, and because he could. I dug my nails into my palm now, grounding myself. I wasn't that boy anymore. I had an apartment, a job, a curated life built on silence and invisibility. I'd gone a decade without being sniffed out. And then Arden Vexley had to walk in smelling like every instinct I had tried to bury. Good morning, his voice cut through the room. Smooth. Measured. Not the voice of a high school bully, but of a man who commanded attention the moment he spoke. I'm Arden Vexley, your new CEO. I look forward to getting to know all of you. I didn't look up. I couldn't, because I knew what I'd see. His eyes on me. Still, the meeting dragged, or maybe it flew. I couldn't tell. My senses were flooded. That scent of his filled the room, clawing at the edges of my composure. I didn't understand how it could be so strong. I wasn't in cycle. I wasn't even close. But my body reacted anyway. Tight chest, hot skin, the faintest tremble in my fingers. I told myself it was fear. That was easier than the other possibility. When it finally ended, I slipped out fast, keeping my steps measured but brisk. I took the back stairwell down to the 16th floor, where my department lived in relative peace. I didn't expect him to follow. Why would he? I'd made it halfway to my desk before I heard the deep, too familiar voice behind me. Crawford. I froze. No one here called me that. Not even HR. It was technically my last name, but to Arden Vexley, it had always been more like a nickname, his version of a leash. I turned slowly. He was closer than I wanted him to be, holding a tablet casually like we were colleagues. His eyes searched my face, calm but curious. And his scent, stronger here, in the tighter space of the hallway, coiled around me like heat in a blanket I hadn't asked for. Didn't think I'd see you again, he said, almost conversational. I smiled. Flat. Defensive. Yeah, small world. You've changed, he added. I stiffened. So have you. Silence stretched. Then he nodded. Still quiet though. And you still talk too much. That caught him off guard. His brows lifted, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, amusement, a hint of approval. You always had teeth, he murmured. I stepped back. And you always liked pulling wings off flies. I'd rather not revisit either. Before he could say anything else, I turned and walked off. Because I had survived Arden Vexley once. And I wasn't about to let his cologne, his voice, or whatever power play he was starting drag me back into the past. But as I sat down at my desk, heart still pounding, one thought wouldn't leave me alone. He'd looked at me like he remembered everything. And worse, like he regretted it. For the next 3 days, I perfected the art of avoidance. I adjusted my coffee breaks, took alternate stairwells, timed my bathroom trips like a paranoid clockmaker. I even pretended to be in a deep call with finance every time Arden Vexley so much as passed my peripheral vision. If anyone noticed, they didn't say anything. Thank God for office culture, where ignoring everything is considered professionalism. Unfortunately, he noticed. I could feel it every time I walked past the glass railing of the top floor, and sensed the weight of his stare through the clear walls of the executive suite. It was ridiculous. I was ridiculous. But I wasn't ready to be a character in Arden's redemption arc. I didn't want his apologies. I didn't even want his eye contact. And yet, on Friday morning, a message popped into my inbox with a subject line that made my stomach flip. Team introduction, 1 check-in with CEO from Arden Vexley. He scheduled it himself. Not his assistant, not HR, him, and worse, he invited me for tea. I stood outside his office for a solid minute before knocking. Glass walls, clean lines, wood and steel desk with minimalist decor, a CEO's office straight out of a design magazine, cold, sleek, and curated to intimidate. But somehow, Arden managed to make it look like he actually belonged in it. "Come in," his voice called. I opened the door. The scent hit first. Strong, focused, and unmistakably alpha. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was deliberate. Like he wasn't trying to hide anymore. He stood by the window, back to me, looking out over the skyline. Morning sunlight lit the angles of his profile, but I tried not to notice. Really tried. On the coffee table sat a tray with 2 mugs. One was tea, chamomile. Of course he remembered. "Thanks for coming," he said, finally turning to face me. His eyes flicked to my mug, a half-smile ghosting across his face. "Didn't think you still drank that. I didn't think you still remembered anything about me." "I remember everything," he said simply. I hated how my stomach reacted to that. Hated the flutter of heat that snuck under my ribs. I sat, keeping my expression neutral, spine stiff. "So, this is the part where you tell me how excited you are to lead our dynamic team." And then I nod politely and try not to think about that time you called me a walking whimper in the gym showers. A surprised laugh escaped him. "You always were blunt." "No," I said. "You were just always the kind of person who made bluntness necessary." He didn't deny it. He sat across from me, mirroring my posture but more relaxed, like he knew he didn't have to play power games anymore. That scared me more than anything. "I'm not here to make things uncomfortable, Noah." "You already did," I replied, voice even. "By showing up." He looked down at his tea, his fingers wrapping around the mug like he needed grounding. "I've changed," he said. I narrowed my eyes. "Or you just learned to pretend better." That stung. I saw it in the flick of his brow, the quick exhale through his nose. "You think I'm still that guy?" he asked quietly. I gave him a flat look. "Do you think I'm still the kid you shoved into lockers?" He didn't answer right away. "Then no, you're sharper now. Quieter but not scared. It's different." "And you?" I asked. "You talk without fists now. That's progress." Another flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, but also regret. "I deserved that," he said. "You deserved worse," I muttered. Silence fell. Heavy, but not hostile. Outside the glass the office bustled. Phones rang. People passed, oblivious. Inside, the air was too still. Finally, Arden spoke. "I worked hard to get here. I trained, cleaned up. I thought leadership would feel like power. But it doesn't. Not really. It feels like watching people avoid you. Like I'm wearing a badge I didn't earn." I blinked. "That wasn't what I expected." "Is that why you asked me here?" I asked. "To confess?" He gave me a look. "To reconnect." I stared. "With the guy you humiliated for 4 years?" He didn't flinch. "With the guy I remembered long after high school ended," he said. "The guy who made me feel things I didn't understand. Back then, I thought dominance meant crushing what I couldn't control. You terrified me, Noah. Not because you were weak, but because you weren't. That stopped me cold. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the boy who barked insults and hid behind a pack of followers. He was still intense, still dominant. But there was no cruelty now, only something raw, human. I stood. That's not my problem to solve. I know, he said. But I had to say it. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. The tea was a nice touch, I said. But if this is your redemption tour, pick a different tour guide. He didn't stop me. But as I stepped into the hallway, I felt his gaze settle on my back. And somehow, it didn't burn like it used to. It just lingered. It started on a Wednesday. Because of course it did. Wednesdays were cursed anyway. Middle of the week, middle of a spreadsheet, middle of pretending everything was under control. Only this time, things weren't. The numbers on my screen blurred for a split second. Then the edges sharpened again. My hands felt too warm. My collar itched. I blinked, once, twice. Hard. No, 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 not now. I leaned back in my chair, taking slow, measured breaths. The floor around me buzzed with coworkers typing, murmuring, sipping their fifth cups of coffee like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. Inside me. The suppressants I'd taken religiously, without fail for years, had failed. I felt it like a static charge under my skin, my body vibrating with low-level discomfort, heightened senses, a drop of something deep in my gut, like gravity had doubled just for me. And worst of all, his scent. It cut through the air like a blade wrapped in velvet. I didn't need to see him. I knew he was somewhere nearby, maybe just down the hall, because that specific mix of pine wood and command was too strong, too focused. And reacted. A chill ran through me, immediately betrayed by the heat rising under my skin. I broke into a light sweat. My hands trembled. My breath caught. No one was looking. No one had noticed. Yet, I stood up slowly, grabbed my phone, and walked with what I hoped was casual urgency toward the far end of the floor. Past the elevators. Past the break room. To the one place no one ever went unless they absolutely had to. The server room. Cool. Quiet. Locked from the inside. Perfect. I closed the door behind me and pressed my forehead against the metal wall. The hum of machines filled the space. Cooling fans whirred like lullabies. My skin immediately started to calm in the lower temperature, but my heart kept racing like it hadn't gotten the memo. My cycle wasn't full-blown. Not yet. But I could feel it creeping up. And if anyone walked past and sniffed just a little too closely. No. Breathe. I dropped to a crouch in the corner, arms wrapped around my knees. I hated this. Hated that I'd let stress chip away at my dosage timing. Hated that my body still remembered what it meant to be vulnerable. And most of all, I hated that his scent was the one I couldn't shut out. The door clicked. My blood ran cold. Footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Alpha. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. His scent preceded him. Stronger, now. Sharper in the confined space. It filled the room like smoke curling through cracks. Figured you might be in here. Arden's voice said quietly. I stayed still, not trusting my voice. Or my expression. I heard a soft clink and looked up just enough to see a bottle of water being set on the floor near me. He didn't touch me, didn't crouch, just stood there, watching. The seconds stretched too long. Then, softly, "Is this what I think it is?" My mouth went dry. I could have lied. Could have said I had the flu, food poisoning, stress. Instead, I lifted my eyes and said flatly, "What are you now, horror? Or just here for another laugh?" He flinched. His face shifted. Surprise, then something else. Not mockery. Not glee. Something rawer. "Guilt? Noah," he said, voice low. "I'm not here to..." Then leave. Silence. The server room buzzed louder. Or maybe that was just the static in my head. I stood slowly, gripping the wall for balance. You being here isn't helping. You're reacting to me. Congratulations. Your scent still makes me want to crawl out of my own skin. That's not what I... Then what? I snapped. My voice cracked, my control fraying. What is this? A power trip? A sick need to see how far you can push me before I break again? His jaw tightened, but not in anger. He looked like someone trying very hard not to react. You're in pre-cycle, he said quietly. And you're not safe here alone. My laugh was sharp, bitter. Don't pretend to care. I'm not pretending, he said. And I'm not trying to control you, I just... He stopped, swallowed. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That I'm an omega? That I spent years hiding it so guys like you wouldn't sniff me out like prey? He looked at me, truly looked, and his voice broke just slightly when he said, No. I didn't know how much I hurt you. That took the wind out of me. I stared. His hands were clenched at his sides, like he was holding himself back. Like the scent that had triggered me was also doing something to him, only he refused to act on it. I was taught to push, not question. Especially when something scared me, he said. Back then, you scared me. I blinked. I was 5'7" and quiet. Exactly, he said. And I wanted to be near you more than anything. I just didn't understand why. I exhaled shakily. Something in my chest softened, just a little. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it was the first thing he'd said that felt unfiltered. I leaned back against the server wall and picked up the water. I didn't drink it, but I didn't throw it either. Leave me alone for now, I said. I just need to ride this out. He nodded. Okay. And then, without another word, Arden Vexley turned and left. No taunts, no comments, no lingering stare, just left. And somehow, that made my chest ache worse than anything he could have said. By Monday, my nerves were shot. Suppressants back on schedule. Windows open in my apartment all weekend to clear my head. But when I walked into the office, I felt eyes on me almost instantly. Not his, someone else's. Jared. Jared from accounting, with his too wide smile and friendly elbow nudges. He'd always been harmlessly chatty, but this morning, he lingered. Rough week, huh? He said, leaning on the edge of my desk. You look flushed. Everything okay? Fine, I muttered, not looking up from my monitor. He didn't leave. Instead, he tilted his head, sniffing lightly, sniffing. My shoulders tensed. Perfume? He asked. Or something new? I froze, hands tightening on my keyboard. Just detergent. Jared hummed, clearly not convinced. His tone was teasing, but his gaze lingered too long. You know, I never figured out what you are. You're quiet, but not beta quiet. My throat tightened. A cold flash of panic went through me. I didn't like where this was going. Drop it, I said sharply. He smiled, slow and thin. Relax. Just making conversation. But his hand brushed my shoulder as he stood, too casual, too deliberate. I jerked away. And of course, that's when Arden walked by. It was subtle. The way Arden stopped mid-step, eyes flicking to Jared's hand. The calm, even expression that shifted into something colder. Predatory. Jared, he said, his voice smooth but dangerous. Can I borrow you for a moment? My office. Now, Jared blinked, clearly caught off guard. Sure. I watched them go, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted Arden not to interfere. Another part, the part I hated, felt oddly relieved. 15 minutes later, Jared returned to his desk, pale-faced and silent. He didn't even glance my way. I didn't ask what Arden had said. I didn't want to know. By lunch, I needed air. I ducked out of the building and into the cafe on the first floor. All glass walls and polished steel. Every face was reflected somewhere, impossible to hide. I ordered a chamomile tea, found a corner table, and tried to breathe. But of course, he found me. His voice was warm, not demanding. I didn't look up. If you're here to micromanage my lunch break, I'll need that in writing. A soft chuckle. I'm not here as your boss. Good. Because I don't take workplace harassment discussions over lattes. He sat across from me anyway, uninvited but calm, not pressing. You think I'm doing this to control you? He asked. You think that's all I know how to do? I finally looked up, and his eyes, steady, dark, intense, made my pulse stutter. You were always good at control, Arden. I learned that firsthand. He leaned forward slightly. I wasn't cruel because you were weak. I was cruel because I didn't know why you affected me. You made me feel different. And I didn't understand what it meant back then. I scoffed, though my chest tightened. So the bullying was just your way of saying, I like you? Congratulations. You're every teenage rom-com cliché. His mouth curved into something almost self-deprecating. I deserve that. You deserve worse, I muttered. You were alpha. I was the easiest target. That was enough for you. No, he said quietly. It was never enough. I hated how much I noticed you. He stopped, his jaw flexing. Instinct isn't supposed to scare you, but mine did. And I took it out on you. Something in my throat tightened. I looked away, focusing on my tea, on the faint ripples when I stirred the spoon. Does this mean you're apologizing? Yes, he said. No hesitation, for every shove, every name, for not seeing what I should have seen. And what's that? I asked softly, unable to keep the bite out of my tone. That you were stronger than I ever was, he said. Because you didn't need to prove it. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I took a slow sip of tea just to avoid answering. He leaned back, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't uncomfortable, not like before. It was searching. Through the glass wall, our reflections overlapped, his taller, sharper silhouette next to my smaller frame. Two people who used to exist in entirely different worlds. And now? Colliding again, whether I liked it or not. Finally, I spoke. Don't think a few apologies will erase the past. I don't want to erase it, he said. I want to prove I'm not that person anymore. I met his eyes. Then stop treating me like I'm still that kid you could push around. His gaze softened. I don't want to push you, Noah. And for a second, I almost believed him. Almost. It hit like a wave I never saw coming. 1 second, I was in the elevator, tapping my badge with sweaty fingers, telling myself I could make it home, lie down, pretend I wasn't about to come apart at the seams. The next, my knees buckled. Heat surged through me, curling low in my stomach, radiating outward in heavy pulses. My skin burned. My breath caught. The walls seemed too close, the air too thick. My suppressants had failed again, completely this time. I barely managed to press the emergency stop before I collapsed against the mirrored wall. The scent of metal, dust and stress clung to my clothes, but underneath it, him. It was like Arden's scent lived in my bloodstream now. Every inhale dragged him deeper into my head, and my body, my traitorous, aching body, responded. I slumped to the floor, pressing my forehead to the cool steel. It did nothing. I was drowning in my own skin. And then, the doors opened. I didn't even register the override beep. Just the voice, Noah. I should have flinched. Should have cursed, screamed, begged him to leave. Instead, I just whispered, don't. But he didn't listen. Of course he didn't. Strong arms scooped me up. I tried to push away, but I didn't have the strength. My body trembled against his chest, fevered and fragile. You should have called me, he said, voice tight with worry. You shouldn't be alone during this. I let out a weak, bitter laugh. I'm always alone during this. He didn't reply. Didn't ask permission. Just carried me to his car like it was the most natural thing in the world. I woke up in my apartment, the world wrapped in shadows and sweat. The lights were low. My blanket had been changed. The scent of tea and cool air drifted through the cracked window. A glass of water waited on the nightstand, and beside me, on the floor, curled up in a makeshift nest of pillows and a discarded hoodie. Arden. He was asleep. Or pretending to be. One hand rested loosely over his chest. His face looked softer in the dim light. Younger. Like the weight he carried by day slid off only when no one was watching. My body still ached, but the worst had passed. The fire in my blood had dulled to a simmer. And he'd stayed. Even when I told him not to. Even when he could have walked away. I sat up slowly. The motion stirred him. His eyes opened, immediately locking on mine. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Better?" He didn't move. Didn't reach for me. Just waited. After a long pause I asked, "Why are you still here?" His answer came low, barely a whisper. "Because you didn't ask me to leave." I swallowed hard. My throat was dry again, but not from the heat. "I didn't ask you to stay either." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "But I needed to." Silence fell between us. Then he said, "Do you want to talk? Or should I shut up and just be here?" "Both," I said. "Start with the quiet." So we sat. The hush between us wasn't awkward now. It was gentle. Healing. Eventually I broke it. "You used to hate omegas." He flinched. "I was taught to." I looked at him. "By who?" He hesitated. "Then, my father. He believed strength was everything. That being soft meant being weak. That omegas were beneath us. Tools, really, for control, for legacy." I stared at him. "So you decided to be like him?" "No." His voice hardened. "I decided to be worse. I figured if I couldn't be the son he respected, I'd be the alpha the world feared." "That worked out well," I muttered. A dry chuckle. "Yeah. Until you..." I blinked. "Me. You were the first person who made me feel like I didn't know who I was," he said. "You were quiet, but you made noise in my head. You didn't challenge me with fists. You just existed in a way I didn't know how to handle." I looked down at my blanket, gripping the edge like it could ground me. "You made me want to be near you," he admitted. "And I didn't know what that meant. I only knew it made me feel wrong. So I lashed out." I looked up. He was crying. Quiet, steady tears rolling down his cheeks. And not because he was trying to make a point, because something inside him had cracked open. I'd waited years to see Arden Vexley cry. I never imagined that when it finally happened, I wouldn't feel triumphant. I'd just feel sad. "Arden," I said, unsure what else to offer. He wiped his face quickly, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything." I exhaled slowly. For once, I didn't want to run. I didn't want to hide. So I moved to the edge of the bed, reached down, and took his hand. Warm. Solid. Trembling. "You didn't touch me tonight," I said. His eyes met mine, surprised. "Of course not. I was in cycle." "You're an alpha." "I'm also not an animal," he said. "You're not here for my instincts to dictate. You're here because you let me stay." I held his gaze. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I believed him. The morning light was soft through the blinds, striping the wall in pale gold. I stirred under the weight of a wool blanket, the remains of heat still curling in my chest, but distant now. Manageable. Across the room on the floor, Arden slept curled on his side, one arm flung around a pillow. His broad back rose and fell with each breath. His shirt had twisted at the hem, revealing a sliver of skin and a long scar I'd never noticed before. He looked human, unprotected, like something real, and for some reason, that made it worse. I sat up slowly, limbs stiff. My head ached, not from the cycle, but from the mess still tangled in my mind. I'd let him in, let him stay, let him see me break. And now? Now I was terrified that all of it, his care, his softness, his tears, had just been instinct. He woke minutes later, stretching his arm out with a groggy sound before blinking up at me. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. "You okay?" Define, okay. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "You made it through the worst part. That's something." I nodded, staring at the floor. The silence stretched, too full. Finally, I said it. "What if it wasn't real?" He frowned. "What?" "Last night. The things you said. The way you looked at me." I clenched my jaw. What if that wasn't you? What if that was just instinct reacting to an omega in heat? His expression darkened. Noah. You're an alpha, Arden. Biology writes the script and you played the role. Forgive me for not finding that particularly romantic. I stayed because I wanted to. You stayed because I was leaking pheromones and too weak to walk. That's not... Don't lie to me, I snapped, louder than I meant to. Don't stand there and pretend this was some grand emotional awakening, when it could have been any omega, and your damn instincts would have kicked in the same way. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. I'm not saying you don't care, I added, voice quieter now. But you don't know how you care. You think this is redemption? That holding my hand while I shake in bed undoes 4 years of being cornered in locker rooms and called a puppy? Arden didn't speak. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow something down. His hands curled at his sides. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The door clicked shut behind him, soft and final. By noon, the building was humming with low-level gossip. HR had received a formal complaint. From Jared. Of course, rumors varied. Some said Arden had threatened him. Others claimed he'd shown inappropriate favoritism. The truth didn't matter. The implication was enough. By 2 p.m., Arden had been called into a board meeting. By 2:05, everyone in the office knew. And by 2:30, I was sitting in the lobby outside the boardroom, heart pounding. I didn't even know why I was there. I didn't owe him anything. But my feet had brought me there anyway, propelled by something heavier than pride. Something dangerously close to guilt. Inside, the voices rose and fell, muffled by the thick oak door. I imagined the room clearly, the long silver table, the circle of directors in tailored suits. All turned toward Arden. Cold eyes, clipped tones. They were the same in every company, people who wore power like armor and smelled weakness like blood. And there he stood, alone. The doors opened suddenly. The secretary looked startled to see me still there. He's not allowed visitors, she began. I didn't wait. I walked straight in. Half a dozen heads turned at once. And there he was. Arden. Standing at the far end of the room, shoulders squared, eyes blank. His father was seated at the head of the table, expression carved from stone. I ignored all of them. Don't say anything, I told Arden, as I stopped beside him. He blinked. Noah. I turned to the board. You want to know the truth? I said. Fine, I'm an omega. I've been suppressing for years because people like Jared think we don't belong in professional spaces. Because people like you, I glanced at the chairman, think omegas are a liability unless they're locked up or married off. A gasp. A shifting of chairs. Someone murmured, Is this a confession? No, I said. It's a declaration. I took a breath. Arden didn't manipulate me. He didn't coerce me. If anything, he showed restraint you'd never understand. Because he's not your definition of an alpha. He's not trying to conquer. He's trying to choose. His father's voice cut in, low and poisonous. You're embarrassing yourself, son. And this company... Arden looked at him. Just looked. And something changed behind his eyes. I'd rather be disowned than controlled, he said simply. And I'd rather stand beside someone who challenged me to be better than bow to a system that never wanted me whole. The room fell into stunned silence. I exhaled, slow and shaky, then reached for his hand. And this time, he took it. No hesitation, no instinct, just choice. The boardroom was dead silent. Arden didn't flinch. His fingers tightened slightly around mine, but his voice when it came was even. Calm. Steady. Yes, he said. Eyes locked on the Council of Suits. He's an omega. Murmurs exploded across the table. Arden didn't pause. Yes, I feel his scent. Yes, I responded to him. And no, this isn't a mistake. He let the words hang in the air like thunder, like a storm he wasn't afraid to walk straight into. Someone tried to speak. Mr. Vexley, your position. Arden raised a hand, and the voice trailed off. I accepted this position to lead a company that prides itself on innovation, not regression, he said. If my relationship with an omega disqualifies me in your eyes, then your issue is with biology, not my leadership. Another voice. This is inappropriate. There are channels, protocols. Is it inappropriate because of our roles? Arden asked, tilting his head. Or because you're uncomfortable seeing an alpha make a choice that doesn't involve dominance? The room crackled with tension. And then I stepped forward. My voice shook, but only a little. He's not my alpha, I said. All eyes turned to me. Some with curiosity, some with judgment, some, like Arden's, only with quiet attention. I'm not his submissive. I'm not his project. I'm not some heat-dazed omega who doesn't know what he wants. I drew a breath. I'm here because I chose to be. More murmurs. I kept going. He didn't pursue me. He didn't manipulate me. If anything, I made it harder than necessary. I smiled, dryly. On purpose. That got a chuckle from someone, maybe one of the younger executives. I looked directly at the head of the board. You want to talk about professionalism? About danger? Let's talk about the real problem. I've spent years hiding who I was because people like you turn identity into weakness. I pointed at the side of the room where Jared stood, red-faced and silent. I was almost outed by a coworker who thought my second gender made me easy prey, who sniffed around me without consent, who pushed boundaries because he thought no one would stop him. The room shifted uncomfortably, and when Arden did stop him, I continued. You called that inappropriate? The chairman's jaw tightened. I took a breath and finished. I'm not ashamed of who I am, not anymore. I haven't forgiven everything. But I'm not running either. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible, and it turns out I'm still here, still standing. A long silence followed. Then Arden turned toward me, his voice soft but clear. I called your name, he said, as if speaking just to me. Not your designation, not your scent, not your body. My name. He looked at the room again. Noah Crawford is not a weakness. He's not a scandal. He's the reason I lead better, because I listen, because I care. If that's disqualifying? He straightened. Then I'm not the one unfit to lead. No one spoke. No one could. Because the room had already shifted, not just in tone, but in gravity. For once, I didn't feel like I was orbiting someone else's power. I was standing in my own. When we left the boardroom, the hallway outside was quiet. No reporters, no whispers, just polished floors and echoes of footsteps. I exhaled slowly. My hands were still trembling. You okay? Arden asked, voice low. I nodded. Yeah. Just adrenaline. You didn't have to say all that. I did. We stopped just outside the elevator. He turned to face me. You said I'm not your alpha. I meant it. He blinked. But you... I smiled faintly. You're not my alpha, Arden. You're my equal. You don't stand over me. You don't pull me behind you. I stepped closer, pressing my fingers to his chest, right above his heart. You stand with me. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but didn't. He just nodded. Then, finally, he whispered my name again. Noah. And this time, it didn't sound like a claim. It sounded like a promise. 3 weeks later, the world didn't end. HR didn't fire me. The board didn't remove Arden. And, surprisingly, no one made a fuss about the fact that the head of strategy for Zenith Dynamics was an Omega who used to avoid elevators during certain weeks of the month. Because now, I didn't avoid anything. I showed up. I sat at the table. I spoke in meetings without weighing every word through the lens of how beta I sounded. And people listened. Even Jared kept his distance, though the glare Arden gave him whenever he came too close might have had something to do with it. The new project was already gaining traction. Arden had looped me in not just as a formality, but as a voice. He wanted my ideas, asked for them, pushed me, challenged me, but never talked over me. We had rhythm now, and not just at work. At lunch, he'd nudge my shoulder with a quiet, try not to annihilate the interns, and I'd mutter back, try not to flirt with me in front of HR. It became a game, a dance, one with no fear in it anymore. The whole floor noticed. But no one said anything. Not when the work got done better than ever. Not when we looked at each other and smiled like there was a secret between us, and for once, it wasn't shame. That evening, we ended up on my balcony again. The sky was indigo and soft. The air had that kind of weightless calm that only came after rain. I had tea. Arden had wine. We said nothing for a long time, just leaned side by side, our shoulders brushing. Then, as the wind picked up, he quietly rose and disappeared inside. He came back with a blanket and carefully laid it over me. Just like that night. I watched his face as he did it. Gentle. Focused. "You really do like tucking me in," I teased. He smiled, settling beside me. "You make it a habit of falling asleep on balconies. I make it a habit of surviving in places where I'm not supposed to be," I said. He looked at me then, long and soft, and said, "I still smell you." I blinked. "What?" He shrugged. "It's not the cycle. It's not chemical. I know your scent now. It's like a fingerprint." I raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "That sounds vaguely stalkerish." He leaned closer. "It smells like tea, and warmth, and ink, and home." The words settled on my chest like a heartbeat. For a long moment, I didn't speak. Then I nudged him lightly. "Seriously? Is that because I'm officially yours now?" Arden turned to me, expression quiet. "Sincere." "No," he said. "It's because you're officially yours." There it was. The full circle. The quiet truth I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from the world. Not from Arden. Not from myself. I'd spent years thinking being an Omega meant being prey, being small, being handled. But now I knew. Being an Omega just meant being honest with your instincts. And finally, mine weren't afraid. I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. He just stayed, solid and warm, as the city breathed around us. And I knew. I was safe. Not because he protected me, but because I had chosen to stop hiding, and he chose to stay.